But now he does put himself at a greater risk of possibly getting his upper body pinned and controlled. So just understanding these risks and advantages, and these things are what's going to give us direction in terms of our offense when we look to approach these guards. Now we're going to be going over the inherent risks and advantages of the opponent playing a supine position. So it's going to be kind of similar to what we were talking about before in terms of seated, but kind of the opposite, but still necessary to go over. So some of the advantages associated with playing from a supine position is one, contrary to when we were playing against a seated opponent, now that his back's on the mat, it's going to be very difficult for me to expose his back. So movement nor positioning will just get me the back, right? I'll actually have to find a means to take his back off of the mat, and then I can look to pursue it. Another advantage associated with playing from a supine position is now his upper body's further away. So a lot of the things, especially when you're dealing with someone who has good guard retention, if you can get control of their upper body, whether it be in the form of cross-face underhook, body lock, double unders, etc., it's going to be very easy for you to pass compared to if you didn't have this. So in a situation where he's supine, it's going to be much harder for me to get to his upper body just because there's more distance to cover. And then the final point being that now he actually has a better ability to frame. Whereas previously his legs and hips were somewhat occupied with his own mobility when he's playing seated, because he has to move around, he has to use his legs. Now, because he's on his back, they aren't as necessary, so now he has more frames available to him. So he has a better ability to carry weight and a better ability to manage distance. Obviously, there means we can overcome this problem, but it's going to be much easier for him to do this. So if I just drive weight into him, he can step on my hip, he can establish a knee shield, he can get shoulder posts, many forms of frames and distance management tools. So understanding this and how this will affect our approach. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the final part, which is the risks associated with playing from a supine position. So first of all, contrary to when he was playing in a seated position, now he doesn't have as good of his ability to move through different postures as well as move himself. So he's kind of it's kind of more up to me on how we engage and in what manner we engage in. So you see a lot of people, if they're not supine, it's hard for them to control my movement. So if I can go side to side, it becomes much harder for them to follow me, as well as determine when they engage. Because if I'm staying back, I can manage when I enter and then when I exit, as opposed to when he stays supine, he doesn't have this ability to engage with me. So from here, a lot of the engagement is often on my terms. So this can be very problematic, as well as he doesn't really have as good of an ability to come back to seated and then subsequently going to a kneeling position. There are ways he can go about doing this, but we won't discuss this today, but it is much harder when they're on their back. So this is generally preferred for me, especially in the context of keeping someone down, as well as the risks associated with when he's playing from this supine position is that this engagement is probably one of the primary issues. So one is that he can't really move throughout different postures, he can't really determine engagement, and he can't really hand fight like he did when he was playing in a seated position. Because now, once again, his upper body's further away. Let's say he wants to make grips on me, it's much harder. He kind of has to rely on me closing distance and engaging for him to make these grips. So you see people like Dorian, for example, he's very good at actually managing this engagement phase. So it becomes very difficult for the bottom man to get any meaningful grips, because I'm here and I'm aware of when I engage, and then from here I can actually use very sudden movement to engage almost in a surprising manner, so it becomes harder for the person on bottom to deal with. So there's a lot of utility to this as the top player, especially against a good guard player. So if we can keep this posture, it can be very beneficial for us. Okay, so now we're going to talk about why is it so important for us to stay on top and keep our opponent down. So especially depending on how you interpret jiu-jitsu and depending on the rule set, it can be more favorable to be on top versus bottom. But especially in the context of ADCC and in the longer rule set, I find that being on top, especially when there's a smaller skill difference, is going to be much more rewarding. So for reasons such that we've covered briefly before, is that we have an ability to make our opponent carry our weight. And this is not only good by itself, but also when we start incorporating ways to beat frames, this can be very fatiguing. So let's say I'm putting weight on Kenta, and from here, he's forced to carry my weight. And in my efforts to close distance and hold these types of positions, I might try beat his frames, and in his efforts to reestablish frames, he's going to have to exert effort, so push me away. And doing this over longer periods of time, when he's constantly in a defensive cycle, will be very tiring. So this is a great way as a top player to kind of remain in a fairly conservative state, but fatigue your partner. As well as what we covered previously is managing engagement. When he's even if he's seated, and this is probably the best mobility he can get when he's grounded, I have a much better ability to be mobile than him. So I can go side to side, I can push him, go back, I can push back in, I can engage, etc. So a lot of the engagement is done on my terms. So a lot of the gripping, a lot of attacks and entries into offensive cycles are going to be done on my terms. So especially if we're close in skill level, it's going to be much easier for me to actually get into my own offense just on the basis that I'm able to engage first, or I can be prepared to engage. Whereas he is going to have to mostly be reactive to me, which can be problematic, especially when him and I are similar levels. So these are the main reasons why I'll tend to favor top for the most part. Okay, so now we're going to go over a third position, which is more of an intermediary between seated and supine. And this is going to be our primary focus in terms of where we're going to be trying to force our partner. So it's what, ideally, they're not going to be seated for the most part. And supine, like we discussed earlier, there are advantages to it. So what we're going to want to play with our partner is almost forcing them into this position where they're, don't post your hands, where they're not seated, but they're not supine. So you see how his shoulders are behind his hips? This is going to make it so that one, he has no ability to carry my weight.